I'm just going to go over a little bit of what we're going to do today. I'm so happy you're here for our Juneteenth event. So first, we're going to start off with a little bit of history of Juneteenth, what it is, what it represents. I'm hoping that we all have a little sliver of information of what it is already, but today, hopefully you can walk away with a little more sliver of information on what it is, what it represents, and the term Juneteenth, what it is short for. It's actually short for June 19th. And it also goes by many other names, such as Emancipation Day, Liberation Day, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and so many other days. And it's just a tradition that the African-American community, one of the longest standing traditions, has celebrated every year in representation of freedom from enslavement. So I'm gonna go over, I have a quick 3-minute and 24-second video that I'm going to share with us all. And also, I want to acknowledge that Juneteenth is also now a federal holiday. So yay! That is wonderful. Some of you are probably in the comfort of your own homes in observance of Juneteenth. I know Antioch is going to observe it on July 2nd and next year on the 20th of June. And so that's exciting. So I did not want to go without acknowledging that it is now a holiday, which is something that the African-American community has been pushing for years, for decades. So we'll start off with a history video, and thereafter I'm going to introduce our 3 speakers. You probably saw their bios in the email that I sent, or that JLC sent out, Justice Leadership Council. I'm going to go ahead and refresh your memory, introduce them, and they have a dynamic presentation for us today, which I'm so excited for. And after that, if you have any of your own acknowledgements, questions, if you have an answer to a question, if there's anything on your heart, on your mind, any excitement, any nervousness, anything that you would like to just speak on, we have carved out a few minutes at the end of the presentations, the last 15 minutes or so of today's event, just for you to open up and speak about it. We wanted to allow that space for anyone to say whatever it is they feel like they would like to say. How does that sound? Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and start with a little presentation on the history of Juneteenth. Sound okay? No sound.
African American Studies at Georgetown University.
Perfect.
I'm a historian of African American life and culture. Juneteenth is a commemoration holiday of June 19, 1865, when a group of African Americans in Galveston, Texas, received the news that they indeed were free. President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but news of the end of slavery in Texas had not traveled to this community until 1865. Since then, Juneteenth has been a day of commemoration of the struggle against slavery and a celebration of freedom. One of the biggest misconceptions about Juneteenth is that people often think that was the day that slavery ended in the United States. But in fact, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States, was passed in the Senate on April 8, 1864, and the House on January 31st, 1865. Although Juneteenth celebrates the knowledge that slavery had ended, it's important to remember that the conditions that mirrored slavery, whether it was Jim Crow or the suppression of civil rights or continued struggles to fight racism, those continued long after the end of slavery. And so the Juneteenth holiday reminds us of where we've come, and it also inspires us to think about the places we want to go. As African Americans left the South to pursue opportunities throughout the 20th century in northern and western cities, the celebration of Juneteenth moved from being a Texas-based celebration to a national one, in which people gathered with families and friends and community to remember the incredible struggle of a people against slavery and to create new traditions that allowed them to reflect about the struggle for civil rights and the ongoing struggle against racism. Although slavery slavery was abolished in 1865, the fight for civil rights has continued to the present day. So Juneteenth provides people with a sense of encouragement and inspiration to continue to fight on behalf of their community and their families for freedom. And it also is a holiday that, as it continues to become more and more popular, it allows people to look back at the past and encourages them to learn more about African American history. As more and more institutions recognize Juneteenth and work to commemorate the incredible legacy of slavery in the United States, I hope Juneteenth becomes a day where people commit not only to acts of justice in their local community, but to investigate history in a more deep and thoughtful way.
Great. Okay, so that was just a little snippet that just kind of summarized the origination of Juneteenth, or June 19th, and its importance, and why we're all here today to celebrate that freedom that we're still fighting for. But I think that just making Juneteenth a federal holiday is just one step closer to really recognizing freedom and not just celebrating it, but really living in it and being able to pass it along. And so that's the purpose of our meeting today, and to not only celebrate it, but to continue that torch forward, as I said in the email. And how do we do that? And how do we get encouraged to do that? How do we get excited about doing that, instead of kind of living in that fear of trauma and historical trauma and generational trauma, and just passing it forward and really encouraging one another. So moving on to our final speaker, we are kind of right on the edge of time. I'm going to introduce Ms. Chetina Hunter, licensed marriage and family therapist, is a consultant, podcaster, speaker, and the owner of Always Live Lovely, a mental health service. Ms. Chetina has a Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychologist that emphasizes marriage and family therapy practices, and a certificate in traumatology and treatment. Currently, she is completing the process of becoming a licensed professional clinical counselor. In addition to progressing her business, she is working her 9-to-5 as a counselor faculty at the California State University of East Bay in California in the Health Center. This Juneteenth, Ms. Chetina will educate us on persevering, settling goals, and tackling challenging tasks. So I now hand it over to Chetina Hunter.
Yes, it's so exciting. I'm so excited to be here. You know, this event is just unfolding in such a beautiful way. And, you know, even when we just think about the topic of community, I'm part of Vanessa's community. Like she said, we went to grad school together at Holy Names University, and she dug in her bag and pulled me out in order to help me be able to add to this event. So it just goes to show how important it is to just remain connected and just continue to support each other in order to be able to reach these goals that we all have as a society, in order to be able to just continue to create new ways for us to grow, new ways for us to stay connected and be able to build upon what has already been done. So I'm really excited to be here. Y'all see I have my Black Dreams Matter shirt on. So, you know, really just making sure that I'm bringing all the positive energy. And so I'm going to just share an inspiring, motivational message with you all to wrap things up a bit for the event. And as Vanessa stated, I'm talking about the impact of perseverance and passion in the Black community, while also highlighting just encouragement of goal setting, as well as just handling challenging tasks, which I'm sure we all have had to face at one time or another. So in getting into things, it's so amazing to just see Juneteenth begin to get more recognition that it deserves, especially amongst the Black community. So can we just take a moment to acknowledge that again and just clap it up for all the acknowledgement that it's getting, which is so very important in the Black community, because especially in America, we don't necessarily get to learn much about the African American history. It's usually something our families have to teach us. We learn from our friends, we learn from ourselves, but it's not something that's necessarily gone into depth within our textbooks and within our school systems. I feel like things are getting a tad bit better because even at the university I work with, like they have classes and they have majors now, which truly represent really being able to go in depth with this learning that I honestly wish was there when I was a student some years back. So I'm very excited to see, I know it's just a chip off of the iceberg, but I'm excited to continue to see, you know, just how things continue to grow and hopefully get better over time. So we're really being able to honor, you know, what it truly meant. And Vanessa showed a very amazing video, and I'm so happy that she was able to give that brief history because it's something that we're all honestly still learning about and still understanding what it stood for. And something that we were able to gather from that video is it stood for freedom, which is such a heavy word. It stood for freedom. So as I stated, so excited to be here. And just in thinking about when it comes to the Black community, we know that perseverance is at the foundation of what we stand on. You know, since the beginning of time, way back when, it has never been easy being Black and where I am, being Black and American. So much so to where sometimes, or maybe most times, you know, I find myself feeling that I fall somewhere in between feeling ashamed, as well as territorial over the American title. And what I mean by that is territorial because the nation was built on the backs of Black people. And then also it comes with feeling very ashamed though, because of the horrific treatment that is being endured time and time and time again. And this can definitely put someone in a conflicting space. Like you want to feel proud to be American, but then you're also like, man, like where does that value lie in your day-to-day journey when you're being beaten down and torn down at every angle of what's coming at you? And you can begin to wonder, what is the point of continuing to push forward for better? You know, when it feels like you're taking a step back, like society may take a step forward, and then it still takes 2 or 3 steps backwards. So when I kind of begin to think of like, okay, what is the point of pushing forward? What is the point of trying to make things better when it kind of feels like, especially if you watching it consumed into the news, it feels like, you know, nothing, nothing that you do is really making such a huge impact because there's always something that's happening to remind, especially Black people of like, okay, this is how America has seen you since you've come over here. So when I begin to pretty much reflect on that question and just reflecting on some difficulties that I had experienced and pretty much questioning like, you know, what's the point of continuing to move forward? I began to be reminded of how I felt last year. And we know last year was a little treacherous, and I am happy that we have made it to the other side. So I just remember, you know, all the murders that took place last year. And I began to feel very, very numb. And it's a real scary feeling when you feel so numb to where when people ask you, how are you doing? You're like, I don't even know. I'm just here. I'm just going. I'm just kind of being in motion and going day to day. And mind you, not only was a lot of things happening within the Black Lives Matter community, but we were trying to survive a pandemic that we hadn't survived before. So it was literally being hit on so many different levels, like mentally, physically, spiritually. And it's just very exhausting. And as y'all know, Vanessa did mention, I am a therapist. And believe it or not, I know there's some therapists that's here and that's talk. So, you know, y'all understand, but for people that may not know too much about the mental health community, believe it or not, therapists do have the same exact experiences as everyone else, even though we have the skills. It's just sometimes, you know, we may know how to apply them a little bit better, but at the same time, we have days where we're down. We have things that impact us and make us feel depressed, and we feel sad. We need a little pick me up, and honestly, our own therapy as well. So there's no shame in that at all. So it was definitely my second time around last year because I've worked for Cal State East Bay a couple of times. But just as being in this position, it was my second time around working for Cal State East Bay University. And I being the only, and let me emphasize, the only Black therapist on that campus for students to turn to. It was interesting because I reacted in a way of I retreated and I wanted to make myself feel less seen because of all that I was experiencing personally. So, one would think like, there would be joy in being able to represent my community. I'm the only Black therapist on campus. Hooray, hooray, hooray. But that wasn't exactly how I felt. I had joy there once before, and I had put so much energy into the Black community on the campus. But when I really tried to make a difference, honestly, I didn't receive enough support within the community. So everything I was working hard to do just kind of fell flat on its face. And that really discouraged me. It made me kind of feel not valued. So this time around, I knew that in order to be able to have self-care, it was really going to look like me not publicizing myself. I didn't want anyone to announce that I was back at Cal State East Bay. I didn't want the new students to really know that I was at Cal State East Bay this time around, because I barely had a grip on my own emotions. So I began to truly feel like, okay, I can help people one-on-one, but in being in groups, like, I'm a mess. I'm a mess. Even though I'm the therapist, I'm a mess. And I can't even tell you in one word how I'm feeling. So how can I sit here and hold space for groups of people? And even when I made that decision to retreat, I felt very solid in it. Like, it's self-care. So I'm like, how can I go wrong when I'm taking care of myself? Like, talk about self-care all the time. And, like I said, I'm the only Black therapist on staff. So my staff is mostly white, and they definitely supported my decision. So, they would cry for me, and they felt that I shouldn't have to be the token therapist. And they just felt very bad about all that it was that I had to hold. And, because they felt I didn't need to be the token therapist for once, it was helpful for me, and it felt relieving to me. And that support, although it was helpful for me, it led me to being checked out completely from being as supportive as I probably could have been to the collective of the Black community during the time when they probably needed me the most. So now, like I said, that's not to say that I didn't work my tail off. I still worked my tail off. I saw a lot of people one-on-one. And even though I wasn't publicizing myself, the Black students of the community definitely were fighting over, no, you don't pick this day because she's my therapist. I'm going to see her at 3:00. So you can't go at 3:00. So they were still kind of, having communication amongst themselves. But that was just that's as much as I was able to handle. And it looked like, just like I said, not really being able to just I didn't even join the group of the African American Black staff and faculty and association on campus anymore. I just didn't even tell them that I was even there or that I wanted to be a part of anything. And that's what I mean by just retreating, because I wanted to avoid any expectation that everybody was going to put on me as the only Black therapist on campus during this time. And then so when I think about it, I'm kind of like, seriously, how was I supposed to be able to help someone while I'm experiencing the same exact trauma as them? I have the same fears as them, and I'm having the same grief as them. Heck, shoot, I am them basically at this point. And then so I had to be able to provide myself more time to just reflect in this space. And that's what I mean by, as a therapist, we have the same experiences, but I do know the skills. And so even though I was getting to a place where I felt really numb, I knew there would get a point where, okay, you're going to have to start taking a step back and applying these skills in order to be able to pull yourself out of this. Because you never want to retreat so much, even if it feels good, even if you're like, this is self-care, I don't have to worry about everybody else right now, this is my decision. You never want to retreat so much that it hurts the community more than it's helping the community. And then so when you are feeling numb and when you are feeling overwhelmed, it's so very important. And how I really helped myself was remembering who and what I came from. So remember who and what you came from anytime you feel like you want to retreat and you just want to check out. Because the reality is, all of us work, we're in spaces where people are grabbing for our energy, looking up to us, looking for a sense of direction. And we can get traumatized too. We can feel like we need a break. We can definitely experience burnout. So it's so important to find what you need to be grounded in and what you need to stand firm upon. So for myself, I know that, I not only come from enslaved people, but I acknowledge I come from sharecroppers. I come from musicians. I come from doctors. I come from business owners. I come from mothers and I come from fathers, and I definitely come from churchgoers on Sunday. So, I come from motivation being speaking over me literally every single day As you know, my father and my mother would prepare me to go to daycare. I come from getting straight A's, and I come from East Oakland, California. So that's a parallel in itself. And I come from hard workers who really got up at the crack of dawn to make sure that all was taken care of so that their children didn't have to go without. I knew that I came from strength. I come from prayers. And I know that when I am down, it's so important for me not to stay there. I call it my Alice in Wonderland hole, but it's so important for me not to stay there because that's not where my dreams live. So, you know, much can go on in day-to-day things. And, you know, you can turn on the news and honestly, you can see all these different modern day lynchings is what I call them. I know a lot of people call them that's happening and get fed up. So I was starting to get discouraged. And, you know, you can get absolutely depleted if your kid. It's important to watch the news, but sometimes the news just seems to sometimes report all the negative things that they don't talk about, you know, some of the positive things. So at this point, I don't even watch the news. I just hear the news secondhand from other people because that's how I'm still able to just find my joy. And it was really just being able to reflect on, you know, our ancestors, you know, they were not freed from us for us to be able to throw in the towel when the going gets rough. And then after I was able to get back in touch with myself, with my feelings, and best believe I had to have a good old cry. I just had to cry it out because sometimes that's what you need. There's no shame in being able to cry. That's a way for your body to be able to release all that's pent up in there when you may not can find the words. So I began to wonder, you know, okay, what can I say to the community that may be different than what has already been said by everyone else? Because if I feel like something's being said already, I don't want to sound like a broken record. I only want to speak when I have something different to say. So, excuse me, I did what I knew I could do, and that was I took out my phone, I pressed record, and I made a video to post to social media platforms, and I entitled it An Uplifting Message to My Black Community. And then so in that video, I emphasized our endurance. I emphasize acknowledging trauma that I was experiencing, recognizing honestly that some people just do not want the world to change because they already feel and believe to the depths of their soul that it is already better and the best that it could be. And really just reflecting on taking ownership and the actions that can be done to move forward. So, you know, I do want to pause for a moment and just allow us to just breathe because I know I've just shared a whole lot. And it's important for us to be able to remind ourselves to ground ourselves in breathing. And just really being able to acknowledge that, you know, this message is for everyone. Because when Black people experience liberation and freedom, that's when we're all able to become free. So we really have to work on supporting each other and centering Black liberation so that we may experience social change. And, you know, change is a word that's thrown around all the time. It's in a lot of our favorite quotes. And it's a really big word that holds a lot of weight and it can feel intimidating. You know, when it comes to goal setting, because goal setting, a lot of times are goals that impact not only yourself, but others as well. And then so change is the word, honestly, that the ancestors saw when they looked up as they were about to begin on this new chapter of freedom. And freedom is the word that encompasses all that you desire because you have the option to choose. And with having choice, you have power. That's where your power lives. And so you see, the only thing that always helps me hold on to my power, I would say, when facing obstacles is remembering my why. That got me all the way through school, all the way through grad school, even when I was in the middle of the floor, like, why did I do this to myself? It was me remembering my why. And then so if there is no why, there's no sense of direction. If there's no why, there is no purpose. If there is no why, there is no courage. And you see, throughout history, the Black community has been taught to assimilate, honestly, to the European outlook of individualism versus collectivism, which is what our ancestors were prided on. So the idea of reaching back for others to help them along is really, you know, something that we have to begin to turn back to. We have to remember that we're all honestly better together. The idea of community, you know, is something that gets lost, especially when we have this mentality of every man for himself. And I remember earlier in my, you know, speech, I was saying when I retreated, that's what I was doing. I was kind of on that every man for himself type of mentality. And I focused more on isolation. That's why I was striving more with just the one-on-one rather than being in the groups. And I didn't really probably realize that being amongst the community as their therapist, which holds a lot of weight, but honestly, that's probably what I needed most. In the same way that they probably needed it most, I needed it most too. And knowing that, I didn't have to be healed probably, but honestly, just showing up more in those spaces in that way particularly would have been what meant everything to them and probably everything to me. Allowing the togetherness to be the healing. That's so important. The togetherness, there's so much healing and so much beauty and just so much joy that is in just being and coming together, no matter the differences that we have. So it's really time for us to get back to that. But honestly, like I said, there's so much that still happens that makes you think, is that even possible? Like, is that even realistic? And I know that, in my reading, Antioch University stands on winning one for humanity. So it's really important for you to, at sometime today, sometime this weekend, to think, how have you applied that to your daily choices? How have you seen victories won since Juneteenth? And what is one thing you can do to help reach this goal of just winning one for humanity? Because we're taught in today's society that capitalism, we're supposed to just work ourselves to the bone. Honestly, just go, especially here in America. And then so going from one goal to the next and from one issue to the next is what we're really prided upon, which is just not the way that we should be going. And we must know that it's important to not be drained, to not be depleted while trying to press forward. We must also work towards acceptance, which is a tricky word to say because people are probably wondering, acceptance of what, Chetina? Acceptance of hurt, pain, and trauma? That's not the acceptance that I'm talking about. So just hear me out just for a little bit. I'm talking more so about the acceptance of what the world is giving us and practicing reframing focus from the world providing validation to ourselves, to us as a collective, feeling valued, feeling seen, feeling heard. And if we can do that for ourselves, honestly, we've already won half the battle. We must set goals to, honestly, we have to work better to protect each other and to help each other feel safe again, despite the circumstances, because things are going to continue to happen. And nothing in life is ever 100% easy. And y'all know that just by, working and being in the school systems. So, you're looking at someone here that literally I dropped my first AP psychology class in high school because, I never had an F on my report card and it was not going to happen in my senior year as my final grade for that class. To being someone that went to Holy Names to get her master's and graduated with a cumulative 4.0 GPA in becoming a therapist. And the first person in my family to be a licensed marriage and family therapist at that. So even in the midst of that, the honest truth is that with each year, we're still marching, we're still protesting, we're still fighting. The fears continue to be real, the trauma is happening, and we will continue on. So we have to let it fuel us to continue to thrive. We must acknowledge that although our ancestors have freedom, they still weren't set up for success and truly being able to survive within the new chapter. They were hit with obstacles after obstacles as they learned to set new goals. So after years of hard work, they still had to start from scratch. And for most, that looked like reworking the lands they were enslaved on. On top of that, the impact on their mental health was never, ever acknowledged. But nevertheless, they never forgot their why. They didn't leave each other behind, and they were still together in this. They stayed grounded in what they believed they deserved, which leads me to my final point, which is a bonus tip too, on how I keep myself grounded through it all. And that tip is checking in with self and always remembering to breathe. Ground and breathe in breathing, grounding your breath, settle in breath, live in breath, fight in breath. It keeps you forever connected to the ancestors because as long as there was breath, there was another chance. And when breath from one is gone, the torch is passed for others to continue the legacy. And as we say, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And as we continue to celebrate, we must remember your ancestors are rooting for you. I'm right here rooting for you too, because essentially I am you and you are me. Liberation is where healing lives. Learning more about Juneteenth helps drive liberation, and learning to be liberated is what elevates our survival. Thank you.